Benito Mussolini, once the formidable dictator of Italy, met a savage and degrading end, an episode etched into history as one of its most harrowing conclusions. His demise remains a powerful symbol of justice and vengeance. Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883, in the small northern Italian town of Predappio. His father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a blacksmith with radical socialist leanings, an admirer of revolutionaries like Karl Marx. His mother, Rosa Maltoni, a devout Catholic schoolteacher, provided a strict and moral upbringing. Mussolini grew up torn between revolutionary politics and religious discipline. His father named him Benito after Benito Juarez, the Mexican leader who resisted foreign domination. From early on, Mussolini displayed a volatile temper. He often got into fights and developed a reputation for being combative. Yet he was intellectually sharp, especially in writing and rhetoric. As a teenager, he was sent to a rigid Catholic boarding school, but was expelled after stabbing a classmate. An early glimpse of the violence that would define his life. As a young adult, Mussolini became deeply involved in socialist politics and journalism. He championed workers' rights and contributed to socialist newspapers. In 1909, he moved to Trento, then under Austro-Hungarian control, and edited a socialist paper titled L'Avvenir del Lavoratore, the future of the worker. His radical articles led to his arrest and eventual expulsion. By 1912, Mussolini had emerged as a key voice in the Italian Socialist Party, known for his fiery speeches and writings. Initially, he opposed World War I, urging Italy to remain neutral. But later he reversed his stance, believing war could elevate Italy's global standing. This shift in ideology led to his expulsion from the party in 1914. Now embracing nationalism, Mussolini began advocating for Italy's entry into the war. He founded his own newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, the People of Italy, which promoted militarism and national pride. When Italy joined the war in 1915, Mussolini enlisted and fought until a mortar blast in 1917 left him injured and discharged. Birth of fascism and rise to power. After World War I, Italy descended into economic and political chaos. Soldiers returned home to find poverty, inflation, and unemployment. The country teetered on the edge of collapse, with various factions vying for dominance. Seeing a chance to seize power, Mussolini launched a new movement in 1919 called the Fasci di Combattimento. It combined extreme nationalism, militarism, and authoritarian rhetoric. He blamed communists for Italy's woes and promised to restore national greatness. His paramilitary followers, the infamous Black Shirts, violently attacked leftists, unions, and political enemies. Despite a humiliating defeat in the 1919 elections, Mussolini's popularity grew over the next few years. As Italy's government faltered, many citizens longed for a decisive leader. In 1921, Mussolini formally established the National Fascist Party. Backed by the middle class, business elites, and the military, he was seen as a bulwark against a communist uprising. By 1922, Italy was engulfed in strikes, street clashes, and civil unrest. On October 28th, Mussolini launched the infamous March on Rome with his Black Shirts, demanding the king appoint him as head of government. King Victor Emmanuel III, fearing civil war and thinking Mussolini could be controlled, granted his demand the next day. Once in power, Mussolini moved swiftly to dismantle Italy's democratic institutions. By 1925, he had assumed full dictatorial control, calling himself Il Duce, the leader. Over the next 20 years, he ruled with absolute authority. Opposition was crushed, the press was censored, and a climate of fear dominated Italian life. While he pushed grand construction projects and propaganda campaigns, the economy remained weak, and many of these initiatives were more show than substance. Imperial dreams and alliance with Hitler. In the 1930s, Mussolini envisioned building a new Roman Empire. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia, using brutal tactics and chemical weapons. Although the League of Nations condemned the aggression, no nation took real action to stop him, fueling his sense of invincibility. By 1936, Mussolini had drawn close to Adolf Hitler. They shared a mutual admiration for authoritarianism, military conquest, and the destruction of liberal democracy. In 1939, they signed the Pact of Steel, binding Italy to Nazi Germany in a military alliance. When World War II began later that year, Mussolini hesitated at first, but eventually joined the Axis on June 10, 1940, believing the conflict would be brief and rewarding. He declared war on Britain and France, hoping for territorial expansion. Mussolini's fall and arrest. In July 1943, Allied forces invaded Sicily, marking the beginning of Italy's defeat. With morale in ruins and the country falling apart, even members of Mussolini's inner circle turned against him. On July 24th, the Fascist Grand Council voted to strip him of power. The next day, the king summoned Mussolini to the palace and dismissed him. Marshal Pietro Badoglio was named the new leader, and Mussolini was arrested as soon as he left the meeting. To prevent his rescue, Mussolini was moved from place to place and eventually imprisoned at the remote Hotel Campo Imperatore in the Apennine Mountains. Isolated and powerless, he was completely cut off from the world. On September 8, 1943, Italy officially surrendered to the Allies. Italian forces laid down their arms, some even turning on their former German allies. But Hitler refused to let Mussolini go. On September 12th, in a daring operation known as Operation Oak, German paratroopers rescued him without a single shot fired. Mussolini was installed as the head of a puppet regime in northern Italy, the Italian Social Republic or the Republic of Salo, but he had no real authority left. By 1945, as Germany collapsed, Mussolini's final days approached. Final flight and execution. As the Allies and Italian partisans closed in, Mussolini attempted to flee on April 25, 1945. He was in Milan, hoping to organise a last stand, but the city had already rebelled. Offered a chance to surrender, Mussolini refused, still clinging to hope. He fled north toward Lake Como with his mistress, Clara Petacci, and a group of loyalists. Disguised as a German soldier, he joined a retreating convoy headed for the Swiss border. But on April the 27th, in the town of Dongo, Italian partisans stopped the convoy. They searched the vehicles and soon spotted a suspicious man in German uniform. Short, pale and visibly shaken. It was Mussolini. He offered no resistance as he was arrested and taken to a farmhouse in the nearby village of Bonzanico. On April 28, 1945, the National Liberation Committee in Milan ordered his execution. At around 4:10 p.m, partisan leader Walter Audizio, codenamed Colonel Valerio, arrived with others to carry it out. Mussolini and Petacci were driven to the village of Giulino di Mezzegra. There, standing against a stone wall, they were shot. Mussolini first, then Petacci, who tried to shield him. The bodies were riddled with bullets even after death. Estimates suggest more than a dozen, possibly over 40, hit Mussolini's corpse. But even that wasn't the end. Aftermath and legacy. The partisans loaded the bodies onto a truck and drove them to Milan. On April 29th at dawn, they arrived at Piazzale Loreto, a location chosen deliberately. Less than a year earlier, Mussolini's regime had executed 15 resistance fighters in that same square and left their bodies on display. Now it was Mussolini's turn. His body, along with Petacci's and others, was dumped on the ground. A mob gathered, shouting, spitting and kicking his corpse. Some even shot it again. Petacci's body was also desecrated, though she held no official power. Eventually, the partisans hung the bodies upside down from a metal beam at a gas station for all to see. Even Winston Churchill later remarked that while Mussolini's execution was justified, the public mutilation was horrifying. After several hours, the bodies were taken down, placed in cheap coffins and stored in a morgue. Authorities feared that Mussolini's grave might become a fascist shrine, so they buried him in an unmarked grave outside Milan. Yet his story didn't end there. In 1946, Mussolini's body was stolen by fascist sympathisers, hoping to give him a proper burial. After being recovered and hidden for over a decade, the government finally relented. In 1957, his remains were returned to his hometown of Predappio, where he was buried. Today his tomb still draws visitors. Some are staunch fascists, others are simply curious about the man whose rise and fall left such a dark legacy in modern history. As a young man, Mussolini embraced socialism and became a journalist. He fought for workers' rights, wrote for socialist newspapers, and was even arrested for his anti-government views. But everything changed in 1914. Though he once opposed World War I, Mussolini suddenly flipped. Believing the war could make Italy stronger. His betrayal of socialist ideals got him kicked out of the party. He launched his own newspaper, promoting war and nationalism. When Italy joined the war, Mussolini enlisted, but was wounded in 1917 and sent home. Part 3. The birth of fascism. After the war, Italy was a mess. The economy was in ruins. Veterans returned home angry. Protests, strikes, and violence were everywhere. Sensing an opportunity, Mussolini created a political movement in 1919, the Fasci di Combattimento, blending nationalism, authoritarianism, and anti-communism. His followers, the Blackshirts, used violence to silence opponents. Though his movement flopped in the 1919 elections, support grew. By 1922, with Italy in crisis, Mussolini marched on Rome with his followers. The king, fearing civil war, gave in and made Mussolini prime minister. Within just a few years, Mussolini had dismantled democracy and declared himself Il Duce, the leader. Part 4. Dictatorship and Empire. For nearly 20 years, Mussolini ruled with an iron grip. He crushed dissent, controlled the media, and turned Italy into a police state. He launched massive building projects, drained swamps, and pushed propaganda that painted Italy as a mighty empire. But beneath the surface, the economy was weak, and many of his projects were more show than substance. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, using chemical weapons and brutal force. The world condemned it, but no one stopped him. He felt unstoppable, and by 1936 he had found a powerful ally, Adolf Hitler. Together they signed the Pact of Steel in 1939, binding Italy and Nazi Germany. Part 5. World War II and collapse. When World War II began, Mussolini hesitated, but by June 1940 he joined the war, expecting quick victories. Instead, disaster followed. Italy's military campaigns failed in Greece, North Africa, and Russia. Soldiers were demoralised, the public was fed up. In July 1943, as the Allies invaded Sicily, Mussolini's own government turned against him. He was arrested by order of the king and hidden away in a remote mountain hotel. But Hitler wasn't done with him. Just weeks later, German forces rescued Mussolini in a daring operation. They made him the puppet leader of a fake republic in northern Italy, the Italian Social Republic. But by then he had no real power. The war was nearly over, and so was Mussolini. Part 6. The Final Days. By April 1945, Mussolini was on the run. Allied forces and Italian partisans were closing in. His government was collapsing. On April 25th, he fled Milan with his mistress, Clara Petacci, and a group of loyal fascists. Disguised as a German soldier, he tried to sneak toward the Swiss border, hoping to escape. But on April 27th, in the lakeside town of Dongo, partisans stopped the convoy. They searched the vehicles and spotted a suspicious figure, short, pale, wearing a German coat. It was Mussolini. He didn't resist. He knew it was over. Part 7. Execution and public display. The next day, April 28, 1945, Mussolini and Petacci were taken to a quiet village called Giulino di Mezzegra. A partisan commander named Walter Audicio carried out the execution. At 4:10 p.m, Mussolini was shot in the chest. Petacci screamed and clung to him. Before she too was gunned down, their bodies were riddled with bullets, some say over 40 shots. But the partisans weren't finished. The corpses were thrown into a truck and driven to Milan, arriving at a familiar square, Piazzale Loreto. Less than a year earlier, Mussolini's regime had left 15 resistance fighters dead in that same square as a warning. Now he would suffer a similar fate, but far worse. The bodies were dumped on the ground. A furious crowd gathered. They kicked Mussolini's corpse, spat on it, and shot it again. Petacci's body was beaten too. Then, they were hung upside down from a metal beam at a gas station. It was gruesome, shocking, and symbolic. Even Winston Churchill, a fierce enemy of fascism, later said the execution was one thing, but the public mutilation went too far. Part 8. Aftermath. After hours on display, the bodies were taken down and placed in simple coffins. Mussolini was buried in an unmarked grave. Hidden away, to prevent fascist worship. But in 1946, a group of hardline fascists stole his body. After years of secrecy and negotiations, the government finally allowed his family to bury him in his hometown of Prodapio in 1957. To this day, visitors still come. Some are curious historians. Others are loyal fascists who still idolize the man who once ruled Italy. Mussolini's story is one of power, propaganda, and pride before the fall. He rose through fiery speeches and ruthless ambition. But his legacy ended in betrayal, violence, and disgrace. A brutal reminder that tyranny, no matter how strong it seems, always ends the same way.